What if I told you the Aztec were never known as the Aztec? Yep, you heard me right. In fact, the term Aztec was coined long after the rule of this so-called empire. Hello everyone, my name is Chaya and welcome to my channel. I'm an artist who loves researching Mesoamerican history and mythology and making art of the culture. Today, we will explore the complicated terminology in regards to the Aztec, why the term itself is quite troublesome, and what you can use instead or in conjunction with it. In order to keep things simple and concise, we will focus on three key words: Aztec, Mexica, and Nahua. They all have overlapping meanings, but as you'll note by the end of this video, they are very distinct. So without further ado, let's get started. First, let's talk about the term Aztec. This term refers to the people who inhabited the central basin of Mexico during the post-classic era, the last major era in Mesoamerican history before the arrival of the Spanish. They were the lords of Tenochtitlan, the great city upon a lake where modern-day Mexico City stands today. In their prime, the Aztec were the strongest force in Mesoamerica, forming a powerful triple alliance between three neighboring city-states and spreading their influence across ancient Mexico as a whole. They were eventually conquered by the Spanish and their native allies in 1521. And lastly, they are not to be confused with the Maya, which happens a lot more than you think. Now, the craziest thing about all this is that they didn't even call themselves the Aztec. The people at the center of the story were known as the Mexica. So, who were these Mexica exactly? Well, they were a subgroup of people within the Nahua ethnic group. But before diving into Mexica history, let me explain the term Nahua. The Nahua people were one of the largest indigenous groups in Mesoamerica, and they are the largest in Mexico to this day. They were initially a nomadic people, strong warriors skilled with the bow and arrow, who gradually migrated from the northern deserts of Mexico to the central basin. These warrior groups, known collectively as the Chichimeca, would attack farming villages already established in the central basin. For that reason, many settlements made the use of alliances. Chichimeca would lend out their military strength as mercenaries in exchange for a place to camp along their borders. However, these alliances weren't always perfect, and many times tensions would arise into all-out war. But as time went on, the Nahua people assimilated into a more sedentary lifestyle. Soon, the central basin of Mexico was populated with tribes of all kinds, all laying claim to their own space. But despite their distinct groups, the Nahua people came together with their unifying language Nahuatl, and their culture developed as a hybrid of the nomadic Chichimeca and the sedentary Toltec peoples. Chichimeca translates to barbarian, while Toltec translates to artisans of great talent. Together, they were fierce, yet absolutely beautiful. And that's a general definition of the Nahua people. As I mentioned before, they are a large ethnic group, so naturally there are many subgroups too. For example, the Aculwa, Chalca, Tlaxcalteca, and the Tepaneca, just to name a few. Among these subgroups, the Mexica were the last to migrate from the north. Let's talk about them next. Who are these Mexica? King Coxcox, the ruler of Culhuacan, asked himself that very same question. Being the last group to arrive at the central basin, the Mexica went through a lot of strife as they searched for a place to call home. Throughout their journey, they were bullied by already established city-states and were commonly looked down upon as dangerous pilgrims. They eventually fell captive to the Culhua ruler King Coxcox, who sentenced the Mexica to harsh living conditions and frequently demanded impossible tasks from them. But to his surprise, the Mexica endured and overcame all of his trials. They just never gave up, which is why he asked himself, who are these Mexica? The tensions only escalated from there. Although the two groups had gradually built a kinship together, it all came crumbling down when the Mexica sacrificed the Culhua princess. Upon realizing the tragedy, the Culhua warriors immediately turned on the Mexica and banished them into a desolate island at the heart of Lake Texcoco. Or Texcoco. I'm not sure. The story of the Mexica could have ended there, but the Mexica, they were crazy. And I say that with utmost reverence and awe because despite reaching their lowest point, the Mexica survived and cultivated this forsaken place into their beautiful home named Tenochtitlan. This place would go down in history for its greatness, much so that even the Spaniards were amazed when they saw it for the first time. Of course, this didn't happen overnight. The Mexica slowly built their city by creating chinampas, fertile patches of land upon the lake in which to farm crops. The building of houses, canals, roads, and temples followed soon after. They then appointed their first Tlatoani, chief speaker Akamapichli. From there, the Mexica nobility established alliances through strategic marriages among the elites of neighboring city-states. In fact, it was with the expert weaving of bloodlines that the Mexica rose to power during a major turning point. The chisme here is insane, so we'll have to cover the full story in another video, but in summary, a major political catastrophe occurred in the most powerful city-state at the time, Azcapotzalco of the Tepanec tribe. Their king had suddenly died, and the heirs fought each other for the throne to the point of bloodshed. It got so bad, the Mexica's very own Tlatoani at the time, Chimalpopoca, got strangled to death due to his blood ties with one of the noble households. Absolute chaos. But it was through this crisis that the Mexica were able to swoop in and shift the pendulum of power right onto themselves. Under the guidance of Lord Itzcoatl, their new Tlatoani, the Mexica allied with another city-state, Texcoco of the Aculua tribe, and Lord Nezahualcoyotl, who had existing beef with Azcapotzalco. So together, they waged war and brought an end to the crisis. From there, Lord Itzcoatl proposed a triple alliance, Tenochtitlan of the Mexica, Texcoco of the Aculua, and Tlacopan of the Tepanec. With their power combined, they dominated the Central Basin, conquering other tribes and demanding tribute from them while bolstering the glory of their cities. That is how the Mexica rose to power and fame. And that is a general summary of the Mexica and their history. Now that we have an understanding of the Nahua people and the Mexica, let's revisit the term Aztec. As you may have noticed, describing the Aztec was rather vague, and that's because there's no precise definition for this term. Aztec could refer to the Nahua people as a whole. It could refer to the Tenochtitlan, Texcoco, and Tlacopan Triple Alliance. It could refer to their area of control, or it could refer to the Mexica specifically. It's all over the place. In fact, when you read modern books about the Aztec, authors usually preface the work by defining their use of the word or explaining the vocabulary they will use instead. Like I mentioned before, the term Aztec was coined much later and by someone who wasn't Aztec at all. His name was Alexander von Humboldt, a German scholar who traveled to the Americas and wrote a book titled Views of the Cordilleras and Monuments of the Indigenous Peoples of the Americas, published in 1810. The book was extremely popular and it introduced the term Aztec to audiences outside of the Americas. But it's important to note that Humboldt simply popularized the word. He did not invent it. So where did Aztec come from? Well, the word has actually been documented from indigenous sources even earlier than Humboldt. It was used to describe the people of Aztlán, the mythical land of origin of the Mexica. At some point in time, the Mexica could have been known as the Aztec, but as they migrated away from their birthplace, they adopted a new identity separate from those that remained in the mythical Aztlán. In fact, there is a story of how the Mexica yearned to find and return to their birthplace, but having known the outside world and ultimately changed by it, they could no longer step foot in it. They had become a completely different people. So if the Mexica had chosen to call themselves as such, why do we call them the Aztec today? Aside from the popularity of the word Aztec, there was a major catalyst as to the renaming of the Mexica, and that was the independence of Mexico. Mexica, Mexico, Mexican, they sound similar, and when you write it out, they're almost the same. During the colonial period, the residents of New Spain were called Mexicanos, or Mexicans. This was due to the sheer prominence and legacy of the Mexica themselves. When the people achieved their independence from Spain in 1821, They kept their identity as Mexicanos, and Mexico as we know it was born. But the Mexicanos were not the Mexica. A new culture and identity had developed as a hybrid of the new and old worlds. For this reason, a distinction had to be made. In order to save our tiny brain cells from the confusion of ancient Mexica and modern Mexicans, the Mexica were renamed as the Aztec. It's quite heartbreaking when you think about it, but I for one have faith in our tiny little brain cells. I believe one day we'll be able to distinguish between the two and refer to the Mexica in their rightful identity. But for now, the term Aztec serves as a simple means of convenience. This is why you'll still see articles, books, and even my videos making use of the word. Due to its popularity, it's much easier for general audiences to look at the title and know roughly what they will be learning. That's what I did when I didn't know anything beyond the word Aztec. But once a person steps into this beautiful world, they'll gradually come to understand the correct terminologies. And with time, these distinctions may become common knowledge, who knows? For now, I'd like to leave you with some further readings on this topic. First is Fifth Son by Camilla Townsend. I talked about this book in the previous video, but I just can't recommend it enough. It's a great read if you want to dive into the rich history of the Mexica and people of the Central Basin. Next is the website indigenousmexico.org. They have an amazing article going into detail about the renaming of the Mexica, and I recommend you check it out. As I browsed the site for my research, I also saw they have many more articles about the different indigenous groups of Mexico beyond the Nahua people, so I definitely recommend it. I'll link it in the description below. And that's it! Thank you for watching my video until the very end, and I hope you learned something new from it. Make sure to like, comment, and share this video so more people can understand the difference between Aztec, Nahua, and Mexica. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel and follow me on my other socials for more content about Mesoamerica. If there's any topic you'd like me to cover, please let me know in the comments. Thank you again for stopping by, and until next time, bye bye!